Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and today I want to talk about how exactly did Geordi Laforge manage to rebuild the Enterprise D, apparently all by himself in secret and without any people helping him. Because every time we see the Fleet Museum in the show, apparently he doesn't have any crew except him and his daughter, because we never saw any other people and no one apparently knew anything about the Enterprise D being inside there. And there's also a small nitpick that someone mentioned in my comment section that I want to address, and that is the fact when they first revealed to us the Enterprise D, we see that there are beams of light aimed at it, and we can see the beam itself, and that is not possible in a vacuum. It would only be possible if it's all inside an atmosphere or if there's a dust cloud in there or something. So my explanation to it is simple, that maybe there is simply atmosphere inside of the space dock, and whenever they open a door to space, it simply has a force field on it, just like the shuttle bays on the ships. Open a door to space and they fly out. Now usually they do show at least a blue light on the edges of the door to imply that there is a force field there, and we don't see that in the doors of the space dock. But maybe the force field emitters there are different and so they're not visible, but there is still a force field in the door. And also it would explain why they even need to get the ships into the space dock itself, if they can simply repair them on the outside. I guess the explanation is that in some situations, if there's massive hull damage or if a new ship is being built from scratch inside there, then large portions of it would be open into space, and so it might be easier to do all this work, either repairs or construction, inside a bigger area with an atmosphere. That way people can work there without spacesuits, and it might make things easier for them. And so I always kind of assume that the inside of the space dock might be pressurized, and when they open the door to space, it simply has a force field preventing all the air from going out. Even though I guess they should have an airlock in that case to have two doors at least. But again, just like the shuttle bay inside the ship only has one door, maybe the force field is so reliable they're not really concerned about that. Or maybe whenever the door is open, they make sure no one is working outside in that open space inside the space dock. So that can be an easy explanation for why we see those beams of light, because there is actually air around the ship when it is inside the space dock, so it's not a big mistake. Another nitpick is how come the ship has weapons at all? If it was meant to be a museum ship, why does it have weapon systems? Well, Geordi did mention in that scene he got some droids to load torpedoes into the launcher or something like that, and so obviously he has all kinds of automatic robots doing a lot of the work, and it can also explain how he was able to fix the ship all by himself without any people knowing about it, if he has a bunch of droids or robots working for him. And also remember, he didn't rebuild the ship from scratch. He simply recovered the saucer section from the planet and repaired it and added the drive section of some other ship, presumably one which had its saucer destroyed, and so it only had a damaged drive section, which he also fixed, I guess. And so he combined it and fixed all the damage, and he didn't do it by hand. He had all kinds of droids or drones or robots working for him. And also, according to a prequel comics which came out before the Star Trek Picard show started, it showed that Geordi Laforge is actually in charge of the shipyards on Mars. And he was the one trying to produce a huge fleet of ships to help save the Romulans from that supernova and all of that. And so he had massive resources at his disposal. And so it is kind of believable that he was able to keep the Enterprise somewhere and to secretly work on it, I guess not during that crisis, but at other times. And also, as we saw in season 1 of Picard, Mars also used a bunch of slave androids to help with that production, and apparently Geordi was totally fine with it, even though his best friend ever was an android, but he apparently was fine with using androids for slave labor, since he was in charge of the shipyards. And I guess during that holiday, he wasn't there in that day when the androids got hacked. There was only a skeleton crew in the shipyards, I guess to make the android attack easier. That's why the Romulans chose to use that time. It still annoys me how it makes no sense. Why would the Romulans destroy the shipyards producing a fleet of ships designed to save their own people? Couldn't they wait until after their people got saved and then stage an attack to frame the androids for it or something? So it still annoys me that it doesn't make any sense. But anyway, Geordi apparently was totally fine with having a workforce of androids doing his bidding, And after that attack, all the androids got banned, but after season 1 of Picard, they got unbanned, and so it was okay to use them again. So maybe Geordi once again uses a bunch of slave androids that we just didn't get to see in this season, but maybe on his station he has a huge workforce of such androids, and they are the ones that fix the Enterprise D. Remember, it's a few years after season 1, so it's possible during that time he finished that work. And in the end of episode 9 of season 3, he directly says that he got his drones to load up the torpedoes to the ship. So I guess he wouldn't really call androids drones, so maybe there are other types of robots doing the work, maybe like the ones we saw fixing the Titan from the outside in episode 5 of this season, which look like the same kind of astro droids that we saw in season 2 of Discovery. So Geordi probably has a bunch of those kinds of robots as well, and maybe he does have a bunch of androids since they all got unbanned and he was previously fine with using them, since he was in charge of the shipyards on Mars and it had plenty of such androids. And since they were not really to blame, they got framed, they got hacked, and so they are not really dangerous. And so since he likes androids so much, Data was his best friend for so many years, and so he wouldn't really be against using them. I guess there's the whole moral debate about if they're sentient, then did anyone ever give them a choice if they want to work as slaves for Starfleet or not, or were they simply assigned to do it without question, making them basically slaves, just like Guinan predicted would happen, and why would Geordi be okay with that? So maybe they're not really self-aware, maybe they're not as sentient as Data was, which was implied in season 1 of Picard when they said that Data was one of a kind, no other android was exactly like him, something like that. So maybe those androids we saw on Mars are not really people, they're more like robots in human shape, and so it opens up that whole debate of what exact level of intelligence or sentience or self-awareness they must have to have the rights that normal people have, and so on. So obviously it's a complicated issue, which would have been interesting to actually have in the show itself. Even back in season 1 when they showed it to us, they showed how those androids were being mistreated, and yet it was never mentioned again by anyone, and no one seemed to have any problem with it. And in the end, after the ban was lifted and the people can have androids again, what happened after that, it was never explained. And also, people seem to be totally fine with Picard himself being synthetic, being positronic. People just accept it without problems, and Starfleet allows him to continue being an admiral and all of that, even though he's technically not the real Picard anymore, he's not really a real person, and yet everyone are totally fine with it somehow. So there is no more bigotry anymore, and so all of these issues were just glossed over in this new show, just no one ever debates any of it, and it's a shame because that's one of the things that used to be interesting about the older Trek shows when they actually debated all kinds of metaphysical issues, all kinds of philosophical, ethical, moral dilemmas, intellectual debates about something, and yet in the new shows it's kind of glossed over and no one ever mentions it again. So the issues were kind of touched upon but then never revisited, never explored, never debated about, and that's too bad in my opinion. So it would have been interesting to see who exactly is doing all the work on the Space Museum, since Geordi and his daughter are apparently all alone there. So maybe they have a crew of androids doing all the dirty work, all the work that no one else wants to do, is being done by those slave robots, and Geordi is totally fine with it. I guess it's possible. Technically, they could also be using holograms, maybe there are a bunch of holographic emitters all over the place, which can create any hologram in any shape to do any job, and that can be even more efficient than just humanoid androids doing everything. So let me know what you think, and we can discuss all of this in the comments below, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.